The room was small, with soft sunlight spilling through a single window and dust particles floating lazily in the warm rays. In the corner sat an old piano, its keys worn but still shining faintly under the light. She had spent countless hours in this room, practicing, experimenting, and discovering her love for music. Every note she played felt like a small step into a world that belonged only to her. Music was her escape, her friend, and her way to understand herself. On this particular morning, she felt a familiar mix of excitement and nervousness. Today was different. Her teacher had asked her to play a simple melody, something easy, just to show that she could follow instructions. She had played thousands of pieces before, but the idea of being told what to play made her stomach twist. It wasn't that she didn't want to obey. It was just that her heart always wanted to go further. Her fingers itched to explore beyond the notes printed on paper, to let the music flow in ways even she could not predict. She sat on the piano bench, brushing her hands over the keys, feeling the smooth ivory under her fingertips. The melody was simple, just a few notes arranged in a way that almost anyone could follow. Yet, for her, even this simple tune felt like a doorway. She closed her eyes for a moment and imagined the sound filling the room, imagining the emotions it could carry if only she let herself go. She had learned over the years that music was more than notes and rhythm. It was feeling, and sometimes feeling demanded a little rebellion. Her teacher had been clear. Keep it simple, they had said. Just follow the sheet music. She nodded politely, but inside, she felt a spark of curiosity. What would happen if she added a little twist here, a small turn there? Could she take this simple melody and make it something alive? She knew she had to be careful, but the thought excited her. Music wasn't just about following rules. It was about telling a story, and every story needed a soul. She started slowly, her fingers moving carefully along the keys. The simple tune sounded as expected, gentle and clear. The room was quiet except for the soft sound of the piano. She watched her hands move, imagining them as dancers on a stage, each note a step in a choreography only she could see. As she played, she felt her heart settle, the nervousness easing into a calm rhythm. But then, almost without thinking, she added a tiny flourish at the end of one phrase. It was small, almost imperceptible, but it made the melody shimmer in a new way. She paused and listened. The sound lingered, more than just notes. It had a hint of emotion, a whisper of something beyond the paper. Her fingers itched to continue, to see what else the melody could become if she allowed herself to explore. She tried another variation, this time letting one hand wander while the other held the melody steady. It was like painting with sound, each movement of her hands adding color and depth. She smiled softly to herself, realizing that even a simple tune could carry more than she had imagined. The morning passed quietly as she continued to experiment. The simple melody became a canvas for her feelings, each note a brushstroke. She laughed quietly when her fingers stumbled, and she sighed when something sounded just right. Music was alive, and she was learning to listen to it, not just play it. She realized that following instructions didn't have to mean losing herself. There was room for discovery, even within the boundaries of simplicity. Her teacher peeked into the room, curious about her progress. They were used to seeing her play beautifully, but they also knew she had a habit of going beyond what was asked. Today, they watched quietly, not wanting to interrupt. They saw her fingers dancing, saw the way her body moved with the music, and felt a sense of anticipation. There was something different in the way she played today, something that suggested she was about to surprise them. She didn't notice the teacher yet. She was too absorbed in the music. She closed her eyes again, letting herself feel the melody as it flowed through her. She imagined herself in a grand hall, an audience listening intently, and the notes filling the air like a story being told for the first time. The room seemed smaller now, yet the music made it vast, like the sky stretched out around her. She played with intention, with feeling, and with the courage to explore. By the time she reached the middle of the melody, the simple tune had started to transform. She added small variations, playful twists, and emotional pauses. It wasn't loud or showy. It was gentle, yet it carried a depth that wasn't on the page. She realized that the music was no longer just the notes she had been told to play. It had become a reflection of her own thoughts and feelings, a mirror to her heart. She felt a quiet thrill, knowing that she had discovered something new about herself and her music. The teacher finally spoke, their voice soft but filled with curiosity. "You're doing well," they said, stepping closer. She nodded but didn't stop. The music had taken her to a place where words were unnecessary. She continued to play, letting each note flow naturally, following the rhythm of her emotions rather than the strict timing on the sheet. She felt free, alive, and deeply connected to the music in a way she hadn't before. Hours seemed to pass in minutes. She hardly noticed the sunlight shifting across the room or the way the shadows danced on the walls. She was lost in the melody, exploring every corner, every possibility. When she finally stopped, she was breathless, her hands hovering over the keys as if saying goodbye to an old friend. The room was quiet again, but it felt different now, filled with the echoes of the music and the presence of something extraordinary that had just happened. Her teacher looked at her, eyes wide with a mix of surprise and admiration. "That was more than I expected," they said softly. She smiled, a quiet blush on her cheeks. She hadn't meant to impress anyone. She had simply followed the music where it led her. But now she understood something important. Even a simple melody could become powerful if one dared to explore it, to listen to the heart behind the notes. She left the piano that day with a new sense of confidence. She realized that simplicity wasn't a limitation. It was a starting point. The simple tune had given her the courage to experiment, to trust her instincts, and to believe in the depth of her own musical voice. As she stepped out into the sunlight, she carried that feeling with her, knowing that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. The memory of the morning stayed with her, replaying in her mind like a gentle reminder. She understood that true music came from within, from a willingness to take risks, to feel deeply, and to let the soul guide the fingers. That day, she had discovered not just a new way to play the piano, but a new way to see herself. And she knew that soon, the world would hear the music she had found, even if it started with something as simple as a melody. The next day arrived with a soft, pale light creeping through the curtains. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she approached the small hall where she was scheduled to play. It was a simple event, a gathering of a few music enthusiasts and students, but to her, it felt like a chance to show something new, a chance to let the melody breathe in the open air. She carried her sheet music in her hands, though she knew she would not follow it exactly. Her heart raced as she imagined the piano waiting for her, each key a familiar friend. She arrived early and took her place in front of the piano. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and dust, a comforting scent that reminded her of home. She looked around at the small audience, noticing the curious faces and gentle smiles. Some were teachers, some were fellow students, and a few were simply visitors who had come to listen. She felt a flutter of nervousness but also a quiet determination. Today, she told herself, she would explore the melody fully, letting it take its own path. The first notes were cautious, careful, following the simple tune that had been suggested. The audience listened quietly, expecting the soft, gentle performance of a beginner. But as her fingers moved, she felt the music begin to shift. She added subtle variations, small embellishments, letting her emotions guide the rhythm and flow. She noticed a few heads turn, eyes widening slightly, but she didn't stop. She was absorbed in the sound, in the way it could speak without words. As she continued, she allowed herself to experiment more boldly. The melody stretched, softened, and swelled with emotion. She let her left hand wander, creating gentle harmonies that lifted the simple tune into something richer. Every note carried intention. Every pause spoke a feeling. The audience sat captivated, sensing that what they were hearing was more than just a performance. It was a story unfolding in real time. A smile formed on her lips, though she barely noticed it. She was aware of the surprise she was causing, but it was secondary to the joy of discovery. Music was no longer just a set of notes. It was a living, breathing thing. She could feel it around her, in the quiet rustle of the audience, in the soft echoes bouncing off the walls. It was a dance, a conversation, a secret shared between her and the piano. The middle section of the melody came, and with it a surge of confidence. She lifted her head slightly, meeting the gaze of a few listeners who were leaning forward, captivated by the unexpected depth. She felt a connection, a bridge formed through sound. The simple tune had grown into something personal and expressive, something that revealed her spirit without words. Her fingers moved faster now, yet each note was deliberate, each phrase carefully shaped by feeling rather than expectation. She allowed herself a few daring choices, letting the music take risks she had never allowed before. The melody dipped and rose, soft and powerful in turns, with small bursts of creativity that were hers alone. There was no fear, only trust in the rhythm of her own heart and the touch of her hands on the keys. It was as if the piano understood her, responding to her intentions, echoing the emotions she could not fully explain. The audience sensed it too, though they did not yet know what to call it. It was beauty, it was surprise, it was honesty. A few moments later, she felt a pause within the music, a gentle quiet that allowed the notes to linger in the air. The room was still, and she could hear her own breath mingling with the faint sound of the piano's vibration. She realized that she had transformed the simple melody into a dialogue, a living piece that had a beginning, a middle, and a voice of its own. She felt a quiet thrill, a recognition that she had discovered something important. Music was a way to express what could not be said with words. Her teacher, who had been observing from the side, leaned closer with a mixture of surprise and admiration. They had expected a simple, careful performance, but instead, they were witnessing creativity and emotion taking flight. She noticed the subtle nod of approval, and it gave her a gentle boost of courage. She was learning, she realized that rules were guidelines, not chains. Following instructions did not have to stifle imagination. It could be the first step toward something greater. The last section of the piece arrived, and she felt a natural climax building. The simple melody, once restrained and predictable, now sang with power and tenderness. She played with intention, letting the music rise and fall like the tide, carrying the audience with it. Every note mattered. Every pause was meaningful. She could feel the emotional weight of the piece, the way it could touch hearts, and she gave herself fully to the moment. It was not about impressing anyone. It was about being true to the music, true to herself. When the final note faded, the room remained silent for a heartbeat longer than expected. Then, applause began softly, then grew louder. People stood, some with smiles, some with eyes glistening, moved by what they had just heard. She looked up, surprised and slightly overwhelmed. The simple tune had become a performance, a moment that carried her heart into the room and touched everyone present. She felt both humble and proud, knowing that she had created something that was alive, something that mattered. After the performance, people came forward to speak with her. Some praised her technique, others spoke of the emotion they felt, and a few simply thanked her for sharing the music. She listened quietly, smiling, feeling a warmth that spread through her chest. She realized that what she had done was not about proving herself. It was about opening a door, showing that even a simple melody could carry depth, beauty, and meaning when played with heart. Her teacher approached last, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I didn't expect this," they said softly. "You've taken something simple and made it extraordinary. Never forget this feeling, and never stop exploring." She nodded, a quiet gratitude filling her. She understood that the journey was just beginning. The audience had witnessed a transformation, but for her, the true revelation was internal. She had discovered the power of creativity, courage, and trust in her own instincts. That evening, as she walked home with the soft twilight wrapping the streets in gentle colors, she reflected on the day. She remembered the nervousness, the cautious first notes, and the growing confidence that had carried her through the performance. She realized that music was more than practice. It was life, a way to understand and express oneself. The simple melody had been the key, the starting point, but the journey had been her own. She could still hear the echoes of the piano in her mind, the the delicate interplay of notes and emotion, and it brought a quiet smile to her face. She knew that the next time she played, the melody would continue to evolve. Music, she understood, was limitless, and her own potential was waiting to be explored further. She felt a sense of anticipation for what was to come, a quiet excitement that fueled her love for the piano. As she prepared for bed that night, she placed her hands over the keys once more, imagining the sounds she could create tomorrow. The room was dark, yet in her mind, the music shone brightly. She had learned that even a simple request could become an extraordinary experience when met with curiosity, courage, and heart. She fell asleep with the melody lingering in her thoughts, a promise of more music to come, and a reminder that she had the power to shape every note into something meaningful and alive. A few days later, she returned to the piano in the small room where she had first practiced the simple melody. The memory of the audience's reaction was still fresh in her mind, and it gave her a strange mix of confidence and curiosity. She wanted to understand what had happened during that performance, to explore the feeling that had carried her fingers beyond the written notes. The room was quiet, the sunlight spilling across the floor like a gentle invitation, and she felt the familiar thrill of anticipation. She sat down, her fingers hovering over the keys, and closed her eyes. She remembered the first cautious notes, the small embellishments that had made her heart race, and the way the melody had grown into something alive. This time, she allowed herself to relax completely, letting the music flow before she even started playing. She didn't think about perfection, about pleasing anyone else. She thought only about the sound, the feeling, the story she wanted to tell. When she began, the simple tune sounded as expected, soft and clear, but almost immediately, her fingers found a new freedom. She let her emotions guide each note, adding subtle variations that created depth and warmth. The music felt like a conversation, a dialogue between her heart and the piano. She experimented with timing, stretching and pausing phrases, and sometimes letting her hands wander to notes that were not in the original sheet. Each variation felt natural, a way to let the melody speak in its own voice. As she played, she imagined different scenarios. A rainy afternoon where the melody danced with the drops of water, a quiet evening where it soothed tired souls, a bright morning where it sang with hope. Each image shaped the sound in her mind, and she let that shape the notes. The music became layered, a gentle intertwining of rhythm, emotion, and imagination. She felt a sense of awe at the power of something so simple to become so rich when given attention and care. Her teacher visited that afternoon, curious to see her continue. They watched silently as she played, noticing the subtle changes in her technique and the way her expressions matched the music. Her hands moved with confidence, with a sense of dialogue between thought and sound. The teacher could see that she was no longer just following instructions. She was shaping the music herself, learning to trust her instincts and feelings. It was a transformation, quiet yet undeniable. She experimented with dynamics, soft passages that whispered and loud sections that soared, letting the melody breathe and respond to her mood. She found a particular phrase that had always seemed simple and plain, and she returned to it repeatedly, each time exploring a new possibility. Sometimes it became gentle and fragile, sometimes playful and spirited, sometimes tender and longing. Each version revealed something different about the music and about herself. A sudden idea struck her, and she began to add a small improvisation in the middle, a delicate bridge connecting one part of the melody to another. She had never done this before, and her heart raced as she tried it. The notes flowed naturally, and she smiled quietly, realizing that she could make the melody her own without losing its original charm. This small act of creation filled her with a sense of accomplishment and excitement. Music, she understood, was not just about repetition. It was about exploration and courage. Hours passed without her noticing, the afternoon light fading to a soft golden glow. The simple melody had grown into a rich tapestry of sound, each note layered with feeling and intention. She stopped occasionally to listen, adjusting a phrase here, softening a chord there, refining the balance between emotion and structure. The room seemed to respond to her energy, the piano vibrating with the power of her attention and care. She realized that she could spend an entire day exploring the same melody and discover something new each time. Her teacher finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "I can see how much you've grown," they said, their voice filled with admiration. "You're learning not just to play, but to communicate through music." She nodded, a quiet smile on her lips. She felt a deep sense of validation, not because someone praised her, but because she understood that she had tapped into something real, something that came from her own heart and hands. The music was no longer just an assignment. It was a living part of her. In that moment, she felt a rush of inspiration. She began to imagine performances beyond the small hall, pieces that she could create entirely from her own ideas, compositions that reflected her experiences and emotions. The simple melody had shown her a path, and she was eager to follow it further. She realized that even the smallest tune could be a seed, capable of growing into something far larger than its original form. She felt both humility and exhilaration at the possibilities that lay ahead. As evening fell, she paused and looked around the quiet room. The piano keys glimmered softly in the dim light, and she felt a connection, a sense that the instrument and she had shared something important that day. She understood that her journey with music was not about perfection or recognition, but about discovery, expression, and courage. The simple melody had been a teacher, a challenge, and a mirror, reflecting not just her skill but her heart. Before leaving, she lingered for a moment, placing her hands over the keys as if to say thank you. She thought of the notes that had filled the air, of the melodies that had begun to form in her mind, and of the audience that had witnessed her first transformation. Each experience was a stepping stone, a chance to explore further, and she felt a quiet excitement for the future. She knew that this was only the beginning of many discoveries, and the simple melody would always be a reminder of the day she found the courage to let her music grow. Walking home, she thought about the power of small beginnings. A simple tune, a modest request, had led her to explore depths she had never imagined. She smiled at the thought, knowing that her journey was far from over. Music had become not just a skill or a hobby, but a way of understanding herself and the world around her. Each note played, each variation explored, was a step into a larger landscape, and she was eager to continue the journey, one melody at a time. The day of the recital arrived with a crisp freshness in the air, carrying a sense of anticipation that seemed to hum in every corner of the small concert hall. She arrived early, her hands trembling slightly as she carried her music sheets and settled near the piano. She looked around the room, noticing the audience filling the seats, their faces a mixture of curiosity and expectation. Some were seasoned musicians, others friends and family, but all were here for the same reason: to hear music that could touch their hearts. She felt a deep breath rising in her chest, both nervous and eager, knowing this performance would be different from anything she had done before. She walked to the piano, feeling the polished wood under her fingers as she adjusted the bench. The stage lights were gentle, casting a warm glow across the instrument. She sat down and closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the countless hours of practice, the simple melody that had first sparked something inside her, and the journey she had taken since then. The memory of her previous performances, the joy of discovering variations and emotion, filled her with a quiet confidence. She reminded herself that the audience was not the challenge. The music itself was. She was here to tell a story, and the piano was her voice. When the introduction began, she played softly, letting the notes float into the hall like whispers. The simple melody was recognizable at first, but as she continued, subtle changes emerged. She added small pauses, gentle shifts in tempo, and delicate harmonies that made the tune feel alive. The audience listened, leaning in unconsciously, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. Every movement of her fingers, every rise and fall in the melody, carried intention and feeling. She was no longer just playing notes. She was speaking through them, sharing a part of herself that words could never capture. Midway through the piece, her improvisation became more daring. She explored deeper chords, unexpected transitions, and variations that were entirely her own. The simple tune had transformed into a journey, a story that climbed and dipped, rose and softened, carrying the listeners along with it. She felt the connection between the music and the room, the way the piano responded to her touch and the audience to the sounds she created. It was an invisible conversation, intimate and powerful. She played with trust, allowing each emotion to guide her hands, knowing that the melody was now an extension of herself. The audience began to respond subtly, holding their breath during quiet moments, smiling at playful passages, and leaning forward during the more dramatic sections. She noticed the teachers sitting at the side of the hall, their expression one of quiet admiration and pride. She didn't let it distract her, but it gave her reassurance, a reminder that she was capable of taking a simple request and turning it into something meaningful. Each note was carefully shaped, every pause intentional, as she wove a delicate balance of technical skill and heartfelt emotion. Her heart swelled as she approached the climax of the performance. The melody, once simple and predictable, now soared with elegance and depth. She allowed the music to rise naturally, filling the hall with sound that felt both intimate and grand. The vibrations of the piano resonated through her body, echoing in the air around her. She felt herself becoming part of the music, not merely playing it, but experiencing it fully. Every chord, every pause, every soft trill carried emotion, telling a story that words could never match. The final section approached, and she slowed slightly, letting the notes linger and breathe. She added gentle embellishments, soft echoes that made the melody resonate even longer in the listeners' hearts. The room was silent except for the music and the soft hum of anticipation. Then, as the last note faded, she held her hands over the keys for a moment, savoring the silence and the presence of the music that had just been shared. The audience remained still, suspended in the quiet, as if not ready to let go of the experience. Then applause began, slowly at first, then building to a warm, enthusiastic wave that filled the hall. She opened her eyes, meeting the astonished and moved faces of the audience. Some were smiling widely, some had tears in their eyes, and some looked lost in thought, clearly touched by the performance. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and gratitude. The simple melody had become a piano masterpiece, and she had been the one to guide it from its humble beginnings to something extraordinary. Her teacher came forward, their eyes shining, and gave a quiet nod of approval, saying simply, "You've done something remarkable." After the performance, people approached to speak with her. They shared their thoughts and feelings, telling her how the music had made them think, feel, and remember. One listener said it reminded them of a quiet evening by the water. Another spoke of a memory of childhood that had returned through the melody. She listened quietly, grateful for their words, understanding that the music had reached them in ways she had never imagined. The performance had become more than a recital. It had become a shared experience, a bridge between hearts and minds. Later, in a quiet moment alone backstage, she reflected on what had happened. She realized that the simple melody had taught her more than any complicated piece ever could. It had shown her how to explore, to trust her instincts, and to pour herself into music with courage and honesty. The performance had been a culmination of practice, emotion, and discovery, and it had revealed to her that even the smallest beginnings could lead to extraordinary achievements. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment and a quiet excitement for the future. As the evening settled into calm, she sat at the piano once more, letting her fingers trace familiar keys without playing a note. She thought about all the journeys she had begun with simple melodies, and how each one had grown into something beautiful when given attention and heart. She realized that music was not about impressing others or seeking recognition. It was about expressing truth, exploring possibilities, and connecting with something larger than oneself. Every note she played carried a piece of her story, and the recital had been a testament to that truth. Walking home under the soft glow of streetlights, she felt a quiet serenity. The applause, the faces, the admiration. All of it had been meaningful, yet she knew the real reward lay in the discovery itself, in the process of letting a simple melody bloom into a masterpiece. She smiled, thinking about the next tune she might explore, the next variation she might create, the next story she could tell through her music. The journey was far from over, and she was ready to continue, one note at a time, letting the piano and her heart guide her forward. Each step of her path promised growth, inspiration, and a chance to touch the hearts of others, just as she had touched her own. After the recital, she found herself walking slowly through the quiet streets, replaying the music in her mind. The applause, the smiles, and the quiet awe of the audience were still vivid memories. But more than that, she felt a deep connection to what she had created. The simple melody had grown into something that touched not just her own heart but the hearts of everyone who listened. She realized that music, at its best, was a shared experience, a language that needed no translation, and she felt a quiet pride in having discovered that truth. In the days that followed, she returned to her small room with the piano, but everything felt different now. The keys were familiar, yet new possibilities seemed to lie beneath them. She explored the melody again, experimenting with small changes and improvisations. Each time, she found new emotions, new patterns, and new stories hidden in the notes. The simple tune had opened a door to creativity she had never known existed, and she was eager to step through it again and again. Her teacher continued to encourage her, offering advice and gentle guidance, but leaving room for her own exploration. They would watch her practice and smile knowingly, understanding that she had found something beyond technical skill, a deep, personal connection to music that could not be taught. She listened to their words but also trusted her instincts, realizing that her journey was hers alone, shaped by her feelings, thoughts, and imagination. Every session at the piano became a conversation, a discovery of what she could express and how she could grow. One afternoon, she received an invitation to perform at a small local music festival. It was not a grand stage or a large audience, but it represented an opportunity to share her music with more people. She felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement, remembering the first time she had played that simple melody and how far she had come. She knew that the true reward would not be applause or recognition, but the chance to let the music breathe and touch others. She practiced diligently, exploring variations and improvisations, refining her sense of timing, dynamics, and expression. The day of the festival arrived, and she felt the familiar thrill as she approached the piano on the small stage. The audience was larger this time, a mix of familiar faces and strangers. She felt a quiet determination, knowing that she had the power to convey emotion, story, and meaning through her music. As she began the familiar simple melody, her fingers moved confidently, each note imbued with intention and feeling. She allowed herself to explore freely, letting the music expand and transform as it had before. The audience listened, drawn in by the evolving sound, sensing the honesty and depth in each phrase. She continued to experiment, adding delicate flourishes, gentle harmonies, and small improvisations that brought the simple tune to life in new ways. The audience responded with subtle cues, soft smiles, attentive gazes, and quiet sighs that told her they were connected to the music. She felt a sense of wonder at the way sound could communicate, at the power of a melody to create emotion and understanding. She had learned that music was not about technical perfection, but about conveying truth, exploring possibilities, and inviting others to experience something beautiful alongside her. When she reached the climax of her performance, the melody soared with elegance and intensity. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful, and the audience seemed to hold their breath, captivated by the transformation of a once simple tune into a profound experience. She felt the music flow through her, a living entity that carried both her spirit and the emotions of those listening. The performance was not just for them. It was for her, a way to honor her journey, her courage, and her love for music. As the final notes faded, a hushed silence filled the space, followed by a wave of applause that grew steadily. She looked up and saw faces glowing with appreciation, eyes bright with emotion, and smiles that conveyed gratitude for what she had shared. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had created something meaningful, something that transcended the simple notes she had begun with. Her heart swelled with the knowledge that her music had touched others in ways she could not have imagined. After the festival, she received kind words and encouragement from many people who had listened. They spoke of how the music had reminded them of memories, inspired feelings, or simply brought peace and joy. She listened quietly, humbled and grateful, understanding that the power of music lay in its ability to connect hearts. She knew that each performance, each exploration of melody, was a step on her journey. A journey that had begun with something small and simple, but had grown into something extraordinary. In the quiet evenings that followed, she would sit by the piano and reflect on her experiences. She realized that the simple melody had been more than an assignment or a lesson. It had been a catalyst for discovery. It had taught her about courage, creativity, emotional expression, and the joy of sharing something deeply personal. She understood that the journey of music was never truly complete, that there were always new notes to explore, new variations to try, and new emotions to uncover. Each time she sat at the piano, she was reminded of the endless possibilities that lay before her. She began to think about composing her own pieces, using the lessons she had learned from the simple melody. She experimented with new combinations of notes, creating gentle harmonies, unexpected transitions, and expressive passages that reflected her experiences and emotions. Each composition became a story, a way to communicate without words, and she felt a profound satisfaction in crafting music that was entirely her own. She knew that her journey had only just begun, and that the piano, the melodies, and her imagination would continue to guide her toward new discoveries. Her love for music deepened with each passing day. She realized that it was not about fame or recognition, but about the connection between the player, the instrument, and the listener. The simple melody had been a starting point, but her dedication, creativity, and courage had allowed it to become something far greater. She felt a sense of gratitude for the experiences that had led her here, for the guidance of her teacher, and for the opportunities to share her music with others. As time went on, she performed at more small venues, sharing her music with people from different walks of life. Each performance was unique, shaped by her emotions, the audience, and the environment. She learned to embrace the unpredictability, finding joy in the way each note and pause could convey something different each time. She became more confident in her abilities, more willing to explore new ideas, and more attuned to the emotional resonance of her music. The journey that had begun with a simple melody had transformed her understanding of music, expression, and creativity. In quiet moments, she would remember the day she first discovered the potential of that simple tune. She smiled at how it had led her to explore, to trust herself, and to uncover a world of musical possibilities. She realized that the true value of music was not in the complexity of the notes, but in the depth of feeling and honesty it could convey. The simple melody had taught her patience, courage, and the joy of discovery. It had shown her that even the smallest beginnings could lead to extraordinary outcomes when met with dedication and heart. The journey continued, with new melodies, new improvisations, and new opportunities to share her music. She felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment, knowing that she had found her voice and a way to express her inner world. The piano became not just an instrument, but a companion and a teacher, guiding her toward growth and self-discovery. Each note she played was a reflection of her journey, a testament to the power of music to inspire, connect, and transform. In the quiet of her room, she played for herself, exploring new variations and discovering new emotional depths. The memories of her performances, the reactions of the audience, and the lessons she had learned filled her with gratitude. She understood that the simple melody had been more than a beginning. It had been a doorway to a lifetime of creativity, expression, and connection. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction and anticipation for the future, knowing that her journey with music would continue to unfold in unexpected and beautiful ways. Looking ahead, she embraced the endless possibilities that awaited her. Each melody, each note, each performance was a chance to explore, to create, and to share. She knew that music was a lifelong journey, one that required courage, imagination, and heart. The simple melody that had started it all remained a reminder of where she began, and of the extraordinary path that lay before her. She smiled, fingers brushing over the keys, ready to continue her journey, one note at a time, discovering new stories, emotions, and experiences with every touch.